We're going to see the changes in the pressure volume loop of this cardiac cycle. So let's draw it first. This is the normal. Here we have pressure and here we have volume. We have the isovolumetric relaxation there is no change in volume and the pressure of the ventricle is decreasing. Then the filling of the ventricle, we are increasing the pressure and decreasing the volume. Then isovolumetric contraction and then the ejection. So here is the opening of the auriculoventricular valve. Here is the closing of the auriculoventricular valve. Isovolumetric contraction, ejection, and here is the opening of the semilunar valve, closing of the semilunar valve, and isovolumetric relaxation. Right now, changing some parameters, we change the pressure volume loop. If we increase contractility, that is the contraction force of the ventricle, we are beginning at the same end diastolic volume, but the blood that the ventricle can send to the aorta is increased. So the end systolic volume is going to be decreased because we are sending more stroke volume. So the volume that is in the ventricle after this systole is decreased. So it's exactly here and here. Could be like this, just like this. But also sometimes we increase with the increasing contractility, sometimes we increase a little bit the systolic pressure. So it could be like that. This is increase in contractility. Next, a increase in afterload. This increase in afterload could be stenosis of the aortic valve. So we are beginning exactly at the same end diastolic volume, but we have trouble in exposing the blood. So the end systolic volume remains, it's changed to more here because we are sending less blood. So this increases, and obviously the pressure in the ventricle. So it looks like this. This is the loop of increased afterload. In this example was aortic stenosis. So this is increased afterload. And the other was increasing contractility. Could be digoxin, could be beta agonist. Now a AV fistula, a fistula between a aorta, a artery, and a vein. So it would be because we have decreasing the afterload of the left ventricle, that is, we have a communication between an artery and a vein, so the flow goes from artery to vein, and because blood is leaving from the arteries, the ventricle has less resistance, so this falls to here instead of here. It falls like this, and we have, because of the fistula, we have more blood returning to the heart because the blood is passing through from the artery to the vein, so the return is increased. It begins here, and so we are also sending more blood, and we can expand the blood. That is, we can send even more blood, and the end systolic volume would be decreased because of the decreasing resistance that the AV fistula is making. So it is like this. The blue one, the blue one, I don't have any blue one. Well, that blue one was a AV fistula. That those two things increase preload and decrease afterload. Next, if we graph some valvulopathy, let's say the insufficiency or regurgitation of the aortic valve, here we have blood that is coming from aorta to the ventricle. So the end diastolic volume is going to be increased. The end systolic volume could be increased. This depends on how much is the stroke volume. Yes, the stroke volume increases, but it depends if it increases more than what the end diastolic volume increases. But roughly it's like this. I will put it, let's say, like this. And the pressure of the ventricle sometimes increases, sometimes don't. If it do not increase, it goes just like this. And it is exactly a shift of the pressure volume loop just to the right. The ejection fraction would be increased in the insufficiency of the aortic valve, and the pulse pressure would be increased. Next, if we change the let's say now the insufficiency of mitral valve, this would look like blood coming through the atrium in contraction of the ventricle. This is an increase in left ventricular filling after the ventricle is sending blood to the atrium and then the atrium again to the ventricle. So increase in ventricular filling. And so when diastolic is increased, we have increased stroke volume. The left ventricle can send more blood out of the ventricle, but forward, that is just to the aorta, would be decreased. But anyway, we have increased stroke volume, and the end systolic volume could be decreased because we are sending more volume of blood out of the heart. So we see like this. And actually the insufficiency of both valves change the isovolumetric relaxation and contraction. There is no isovolumetric phase because the valves are open all the time, so there is no change. Now for the mitral stenosis. We have the atrium is fighting against a stiff valve, so we have less blood coming through the ventricle, so the diastolic volume is decreased. It is here. I'm running out of colors. Well, I will put it again with orange. It looks like this. And the stroke volume is also decreased, and the stroke volume is decreased, and end diastolic volume is decreased. But overall, the ejection fraction is increased because the end diastolic volume decreases more than what the stroke volume decreases. So the ejection fraction is increased. But anyway, so we have decreased end diastolic volume, and we have a in decrease in stroke volume here. So, and the pressure remains the same. Looks like this. So this is a shift of the pressure volume loop to the left. So mitral stenosis shift to the left. Aortic insufficiency shift to the right. Now heart failure with preserved ejection fraction looks exactly like the same, almost. And heart failure with decreased ejection fraction, that is, the problem is in contractility. So if we have problem with contractility, we have less blood that is going out of the ventricle, that increases the systolic end systolic volume. I will put it in yellow. That increases the end systolic volume, and the problem is that the heart is not contracting, so we have could be end diastolic volume, let's say because of insufficiency of some valve, so we have increasing end diastolic volume and decreasing stroke volume, so we cannot send blood, and if we cannot send blood, the pressure, the systolic pressure decreases, and so this looks like this because the systolic pressure decreases. So in comparison to the insufficiency of the aortic valve, in insufficiency, in the previous video we saw that insufficiency increases end diastolic volume of the aortic valve, increases end diastolic volume, increases stroke volume, and the end systolic volume could be increased, decreased, I will not count that. And that shift is to the right. In heart failure, congestive heart failure, the end diastolic volume is also increased, end diastolic volume. The stroke volume is decreased, and the pressure is decreased. The systolic pressure is decreased, and so the pulse pressure. In aortic insufficiency, we have increased systolic pressure because we have more blood coming to the ventricle that then is going out to the aorta. So we have increased systolic blood pressure and decreased diastolic blood pressure because now the blood is coming again to the ventricle in diastole. So increasing systolic blood pressure and decreasing diastolic blood pressure increases the pulse pressure. So this increasing pulse pressure in comparison to decreasing pulse pressure of the congestive heart failure.